This morning, Prince William sharing some rare personal insights with Eugene Levy.
Stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit.
When Prince William discovered that Camilla had been moving royal money to a close relative, he acted quickly, and what happened next shook the entire palace. At 9:03 a.m. on 27th January 2026, Kensington Palace was quiet. Guards moved around the palace, making sure everything was secure. Only 4 years had passed since King Charles III had taken the throne, and Prince William had taken control of the Duchy of Cornwall, the estate that would fund his future reign. This morning was different. Normally, William spent his mornings reviewing ongoing projects, meeting advisors, and checking on plans for environmental initiatives or charitable programs. Today, he had a heavier task. He had to review past financial records, focusing on payments for interior decoration, as well as 2 other major expenses from the last 5 years. It was customary for the royal heir to check these records periodically to make sure money was spent correctly. With King Charles's health deteriorating, the responsibility fell squarely on William. But what happened when he opened the record will shock you. He sat at his desk and opened the first files. The first 2 sets of records, payments for agricultural estates and repairs to historical farms, were fine. Everything matched. Invoices were in order. No unusual activity. He felt a brief sense of relief, but then he opened the file on interior decoration. Almost immediately, he noticed problems. Costs were high. Roof repairs, garden maintenance, furniture replacements, and redecorations had been charged repeatedly. More than £500,000 had been spent on holiday homes in Cornwall alone. £200,000 went to garden work. Compared with previous years, these expenses had risen over 20% for no clear reason. There were no emergency repairs noted, no explanation for the jump in costs. William gripped the edge of his desk. "Someone is taking advantage of this," he muttered. The duchy was more than a collection of properties and accounts. Its funds were designated for public responsibilities, including housing projects, environmental work, and long-term community investments. Any misuse of those funds would have consequences far beyond the balance sheets in front of him. As William continued reviewing the documents, he paused several times to compare older records with newer ones. Certain names appeared repeatedly, attached to approvals and recommendations, many of them highly recommended by Camilla. Over the years, Camilla's involvement in household decisions had become more noticeable, particularly in matters related to staffing and contractors. The pattern was subtle, but consistent. William set the papers down and reached for earlier correspondence. He reviewed notes from past meetings with his father, where questions about spending oversight had been raised. Each time, the response had been the same: reassurance that the existing arrangements were sufficient, and that further scrutiny might create unnecessary tension within the family. After a brief pause, William spoke quietly, as if thinking aloud. "Father always said these arrangements brought balance," he said, "but balance only works when there's transparency." He leaned back, staring at the documents. The numbers seemed wrong in ways he couldn't ignore. The air felt heavier. His mind ran over every suspicious line. As he continued, a quiet knock at the door interrupted him. An aide stepped in, carrying a laptop and more papers. "Sir," the aide said quietly, "the other 2 files are fine. No issues. But the interior decoration file, there are discrepancies. Some invoices are duplicates. Others have no records of completed work." William took the papers. They had just confirmed everything he saw a few minutes ago. At that moment, his pulse quickened. Although the names and signatures were not familiar, they looked neat and deliberate. Then he saw one signature he recognized instantly: Camilla. He put the papers down slowly, realizing the weight of what he was seeing. For a long moment, he just sat, trying to process it. This wasn't just about money. It was about loyalty, family trust, and the future of the duchy. Cornwall, his mother's memory, childhood lessons, all crowded into his mind. This was serious. The duchy's funds weren't for personal gain. They were meant to serve public good. Hours passed. William stayed at his desk while aides went through records, checking every invoice, confirming every payment. He barely noticed time passing. Sleep had been forgotten. His thoughts circled back to his father. Charles had always advised patience and family unity, but this wasn't something that could be ignored. Finally, as evening drew near, William stood and walked over to the maps of the duchy spread across the desk. He ran a finger along several marked areas, then stepped back. After a short pause, he spoke quietly. "If she's involved," he said, "then my future reign will not be independent." He returned to the files and continued reviewing the records. Some payments were clearly documented and matched completed work. Others were missing reports or explanations. In several cases, similar work appeared more than once under different invoices. The inconsistencies were enough to raise concern and required closer examination. What had started as a standard review was no longer routine. The issue had moved beyond interior decoration costs. It now raised questions about how decisions were approved, who had authority over spending, and whether proper oversight was being followed within the duchy. William separated the most concerning documents from the rest and set them aside. These records would need to be checked in detail, including confirmation from contractors and independent review of approvals. Any payments connected to household recommendations would need special attention. He remained at his desk and continued going through the files carefully, one page at a time. No conclusions were drawn, but the next steps were clear. The review could not stop at this point, and the findings would determine what actions followed. By the end of the review session, it was clear that this was no longer a simple administrative task. The decisions made next would shape how the duchy was managed going forward, and who held real control over its finances. What William chose to do next would change the course of the review entirely. Stay tuned, because this is where it gets interesting. By the time William arrived home, it was exactly 8:30 p.m. Dinner was already being prepared, but his attention was clearly elsewhere. He loosened his tie and handed his jacket to a staff member without saying much. It had been a long day, and it showed. Still, the moment he stepped into the dining room and saw George, Charlotte, and Louis waiting, his posture changed. Louis called out first, climbing down from his chair. William smiled and knelt to greet him. "Easy," he said, steadying the boy. "You'll knock me over." George looked up from his plate. "We had history today," he said. "About kings." Charlotte added, "And I went swimming." William sat down with them. "That sounds busy," he said. "Tell me about it." They talked through dinner. George explained his lesson in detail. Charlotte talked about school. Louis interrupted often. William listened, asked questions, and laughed when appropriate. Whatever had occupied his mind earlier stayed unspoken at the table. For that short time, the day slowed. After dinner, Catherine helped guide the children upstairs. William followed, reading to Louis while George pretended not to listen from the doorway. Charlotte corrected him once when he skipped a line. "Papa," she said, "you missed a page." "I did not," William replied. "You did," she insisted. He laughed and went back. Once the children were in bed and the house had settled, William and Catherine returned to their room. Catherine turned to him as she closed the door. "All right," she said. "Now you can tell me. What happened today? You've been distracted since you came in." William sat down and took a moment before answering. "I was reviewing duchy records," he said. "Older ones. Interior decoration payments." "And?" Catherine asked. "There are inconsistencies," he said. "Repeated invoices, missing documentation, recommendations that appear more than once." She listened without interrupting. "Some approvals trace back to household recommendations," William continued. "Enough to require further review." Catherine nodded slowly. "Have you spoken to anyone?" "Not yet. Not outside the duchy." She considered that. "You should speak to your father," she said. "And Anne. If there's something serious, you shouldn't carry it alone." William nodded. "That's what I was thinking." "Then do it properly," Catherine said. "Quietly, clearly, and don't delay." He agreed. They said no more about it that night. The lights were turned off, and the house grew quiet. By the following morning, William was up early. Shortly after 8, he called his father's office. "Good morning," the secretary said. "Good morning," William replied. "I need to see the king today, if possible." There was a pause. "May I ask the reason?" "It's duchy-related," William said. Time sensitive. Another pause. I can offer 10 a.m. That will work, William said. After ending the call, he picked up the phone again and dialed another number. Aunt Anne, he said when the line connected. William, Anne replied. Is everything all right? I'd like to see you this morning, he said. It concerns the duchy. Anne did not hesitate. I'll come with you, she said. Where? My father's office, William replied. I'll be there, she said. By 9:45 a.m., William arrived at his father's office. The king looked up from his desk and smiled. You're early, Charles said. That doesn't usually happen. This must be important. It is, William replied. Before he could say more, the door opened and Anne stepped in. Good, Charles said. We're all here. They sat down. William placed a folder on the desk and began explaining the review process, the records examined, and the inconsistencies found. He spoke plainly and stuck to the facts. Charles listened without interrupting. When William finished, the king leaned back. Are you certain about this? Charles asked. These are the records, William said. They need independent review. Anne spoke next. No one else should be informed yet, she said. Especially not Camilla. Charles looked at her, then back at William. If this is as you say, he said, then it needs to be handled formally. Anne nodded. This goes to the appropriate department, she said. No shortcuts. Charles looked at William. Proceed, he said, carefully, and keep this contained. William nodded. I will. With that, the direction was set. Immediately after the meeting ended, William left his father's office and walked straight to the investigation department. He did not stop to speak with anyone along the way. When he arrived, he handed over the full set of files, including the records he had marked for concern. He explained only that the documents required formal review and independent verification. Once the handover was complete, he stepped out without waiting for further discussion. But the matter did not end there. Later that same day, William contacted several advisors who had worked closely with him since his time as Duke of Cambridge. These were people he trusted, individuals familiar with financial oversight and institutional reviews. He asked them to meet privately and bring no additional staff. When they gathered, William outlined the situation clearly. He explained what had been reviewed, what had been flagged, and why further examination was necessary. He did not assign blame. He asked for diligence. We need to examine everything, he said. Every contract, every payment, every approval. The advisors agreed and began work immediately. Over the following days, they reviewed invoices, contracts, and internal correspondence. Meetings stretched late into the evenings. Documents were compared across years. Records were cross-checked with work orders and contractor reports. The process was slow and exact. As the review continued, the focus widened. Contracts linked to the Duchy of Cornwall going back more than a decade were reopened. Payments dating as far back as 2010 were re-examined. Thousands of records were organized and analyzed using digital tools designed to identify repeated names, linked companies, and irregular approvals. During this process, one name appeared again and again: Annabel Elliot. Annabel Elliot, the sister of Queen Camilla, had been involved in interior design work connected to duchy properties for many years. Records showed that she had been assigned multiple projects across different locations. These included work on holiday residences, rural estates, and properties used for official purposes. Several of the contracts were high in value. One showed more than £400,000 allocated for interior redesign work on properties in the Isles of Scilly. Another listed £200,000 for landscape-related services connected to duchy land in Dartmoor. In many cases, the contracts had been awarded without evidence of open bidding. The advisors compared these findings with existing financial rules. Duchy guidelines required competitive processes for contracts of that size. National standards required disclosure when close family connections existed. The records did not reflect those steps. Further review revealed additional payments listed under general terms, such as consultancy or design advisory services. These descriptions lacked detail. When totaled, payments linked to Annabel Elliot across multiple years exceeded £1.5 million. The advisors prepared summaries and supporting documents. William reviewed the findings carefully. He did not comment during the presentation. When the review ended, the room was quiet. Attention then turned to internal approval paths. Several contracts carried recommendations linked to senior household figures. One former Duchy administrator, Shark Lee, appeared frequently in the records. He had overseen contract processing during key years and had approved exceptions to standard procedures. Notes described him as a reliable administrator who rarely questioned instructions. The advisors noted that these approvals created a closed loop. Contractors were selected, payments approved, and reviews waived within a limited circle. There was no clear evidence of independent challenge during that period. William asked for the next step. Legal specialists were brought in from outside the palace structure. Their task was to assess whether the contracts complied with governance rules and whether reporting obligations had been met. At the same time, independent auditors were asked to verify payments against completed work. As the reviews expanded, more connections emerged. Some companies linked to Annabel Elliott had received subcontracts without disclosure. Others had been paid for services that overlapped with work already billed elsewhere. Each finding was documented. Throughout the process, advisors urged caution. They stressed the importance of accuracy and restraint. They warned that premature action could create public confusion or damage institutional credibility. William acknowledged the advice and instructed them to continue methodically. The investigation now operated on multiple levels. Financial records were reviewed. Legal standards were assessed. Administrative decisions were traced. No public statements were made. Access to information remained limited. William's instructions remained consistent. The review was to remain focused on evidence. No assumptions were to be made. Every conclusion had to be supported by documents. As the scope became clear, the issue moved beyond individual contracts. It raised questions about how influence had been exercised, how oversight had been bypassed, and how long the process had gone unchallenged. The advisors prepared a consolidated report. It outlined patterns of repeated recommendations, lack of competitive bidding, and incomplete disclosures. It also detailed the role of internal administrators who had facilitated approvals without escalation. The report did not accuse. It presented facts. William reviewed the final draft and approved the next phase. The findings would be submitted to the appropriate authorities, being King Charles, for formal assessment. Any further action would follow established procedures. But before that, William was still waiting for a report from the investigation department. After 2 days of waiting for the investigation department's findings, the report was delivered to William. The results went beyond what had already been uncovered. The department confirmed earlier concerns and added new information based on bank records and payment trails. According to the report, between 2024 and 2026, multiple transfers of €100,000 were made directly to Annabel Elliott's personal account. The payments were labeled as interior decoration expenses. However, investigators found no contracts, invoices, site reports, or completed work linked to those transfers. No properties were listed, no schedules were filed. The payments had no supporting documentation. The report also noted that each transfer had been approved through senior authorization channels. Records showed that the approvals were signed off by Camilla. The approvals bypassed standard review steps and did not trigger secondary checks, despite exceeding normal limits. Investigators confirmed that the transactions were not recorded in the Duchy's official interior decoration ledgers. They were processed separately and categorized under general expenditure codes, making them difficult to trace during routine reviews. The findings were organized into a clear summary and placed before William along with supporting documents, bank confirmations, and approval records. The conclusion was direct. The payments did not meet governance standards and required immediate action. William reviewed the report in full. He requested certified copies and instructed that the originals be secured. Because at that moment, he had everything to act, and he was not going to let the moment slip through his fingers. Keep watching for what comes next. That same day, the palace was unusually busy. Staff members spoke in low voices as they moved through corridors and offices. Conversations stopped when others approached. Phones were checked more often than usual. By mid-morning, several news outlets had begun carrying the story. Headlines appeared quickly. Questions raised over duchy payments. Royal finances under review. Interior contracts linked to senior figures. William became aware of the reports within the hour. He decided it would be better for his father to hear everything directly rather than through the media. By 4 p.m., he was already on his way to the king's study, carrying the full set of files. When William entered, King Charles looked up and smiled briefly. "You're here earlier than planned," Charles said. "Yes," William replied. "I thought it was important we speak today." They exchanged a few polite words and sat down. William placed the files on the desk between them. "I'll go through everything," William said, "from the start." He explained the review process, the findings from the investigation department, and the newly discovered transactions. He described the undocumented transfers, the approvals, and how the information had surfaced publicly in a short time. He did not speculate. He presented records, dates, and summaries. Charles listened without interrupting. When William finished, the room was quiet. "This is disappointing," Charles said finally. "Very disappointing. It should never have reached this point." He paused. "We will address this properly, not through headlines." Charles reached for his phone. "Please arrange for Annabel Elliot and the Queen to be at the palace tomorrow morning," he said to his secretary. "I want this handled directly." The call ended. Later that evening, the news reached Camilla. By then, the media coverage had increased. Commentators debated the issue. Some defended her. Others questioned the approvals. That night, Camilla released a public statement online. "The reports circulating in the media are false and misleading," the statement read. "They are built on misrepresentation and internal agendas designed to damage my family and my character. I have always acted in the best interests of the institution." The statement spread quickly. Supporters responded with messages defending her integrity and long public service. Critics questioned the approvals and demanded clarity. The divide was clear, and the pressure intensified. By the next morning, the tension had reached the palace itself. At the appointed time, King Charles's office was prepared for a private meeting. Present were King Charles, Prince William, Princess Anne, Annabel Elliot, and Queen Camilla. Charles did not delay. "We are here to address the findings placed before me," he said. "This is not a media discussion. This is a matter of governance." He laid the documents on the table. These records show repeated payments, missing documentation, and approvals that bypassed established procedures. He turned to Annabel. "These transactions involve you directly," Charles said. "I want an explanation." She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Sweat ran down her forehead. For several long seconds, she seemed frozen, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Finally, she spoke in a shaky voice. "It wasn't my idea," she said. "Camilla, she asked me to handle the projects. My business was struggling. I thought I was helping. I didn't know it would go this far." Charles's face grew stern. He looked directly at Camilla, his voice rising slightly. "You almost destroyed the royal house," he said. "And then you sent a message to the public claiming everything in the media was false. You brought shame on this family." Camilla raised her hands defensively. "It's not like it seems. I wasn't in need. I only stepped in to help. I didn't intend for it to escalate." William cut her off. "How does this make sense?" he said sharply. "If help was needed, we would have provided it. This wasn't about assistance. This was secrecy and bypassing rules. The duchy's funds are for public projects and the people, not for private gain." Charles took a deep breath, then spoke firmly. "We've heard all the explanations. It's time to act." After a pause, he continued. "All funds linked to these transactions will be returned to the royal family. Any contracts or approvals made outside standard procedure are invalid. Effective immediately, Camilla will no longer have clearance to participate in duchy decisions. From the 5th of February, she will be removed from all committees and authorizations regarding property management or household contracts." The room was silent. Annabel looked down, her hands tightly folded. Camilla's expression was guarded but unyielding. William exhaled slowly, while Anne gave a small nod. The weight of the decision hung in the air. The next day, February 6th, the palace released an official statement. King Charles announced the findings, the steps taken to recover the funds, and the removal of Camilla's clearance. News outlets immediately reported the decision. Social media lit up. Some praised Camilla, claiming she had only tried to help. Others criticized her and Annabel for misusing funds. But the opinions of the public no longer mattered. The royal family had made its decision. Procedures were restored, transparency was enforced, and the duchy's finances were secured. Authority had been reaffirmed. Camilla would now have to accept the consequences of her actions. She could no longer influence duchy affairs. The family had acted decisively, making it clear that no one, no matter their rank or connection, was above the rules. For William, the resolution was a turning point. The duchy was back under proper oversight, and the future of his reign was protected. The lesson was clear. Privilege could not override accountability. The moment marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Public scandals had been averted, but the message was unmistakable. The rules applied to everyone, and the family had proven that principle came first. In that quiet palace room, with the files closed and the decisions made, the royal family emerged stronger. The duchy, its legacy, and the crown itself had been defended, and those who tried to bend the rules had learned the hard way. So, what are your thoughts on how Prince William handled the duchy investigation? Do you think the royal family would have maintained control if he hadn't stepped in? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the story, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the next video on your screen. You won't